Few things are as important in the history of culture, in the history of our species, than the paradigm of right and wrong. And it is a paradigm because it takes the whole, it takes the one, it takes all that is, and breaks it into polarity. Takes the one, cuts it in half, and creates two. Because in order for there to be a right, there must be a wrong. In order for there to be a wrong, there must be a right. And ultimately, these directions are not absolutes, but are gradients, are continuums, because there is no absolute right within the framework of material measurement, because there is no perfection. Whatever idea, whatever concept, whatever word one uses, it could be gold, it could be finger, there's not a perfect gold. There's gradients, there's variations. Efficiencies can always be improved. You can run a 4-minute mile, but then you can run a mile in 3 minutes and 59 seconds, 3 minutes and 58.5 seconds. You can always improve on anything. There's benchmarks, but in our framework of existence, there are truly continuums. And the question is, what's the purpose of this paradigm of right and wrong? How does it play a role? When is that role constructive versus destructive? Again, that polarity. Because we have all that is, and then we cut it in half, and on the one side we say constructive, and on the other hand we say destructive. Now, in this exploration of polarity, because right and wrong is so moralized, is so dogmatized, sorry for the insult to dogs, but this idea that something is the way it is because it's the way it is, and it is the way it is because that's the way it is. Parents often find this an expedient way to teach. But if we look at construct and destruct as another parallel paradigm that is similar to the paradigm of right and wrong, we tend to think of constructive as good and destructive as bad, or right and wrong. However, in order for me to construct anything, if I'm to make some glue, for example, and one of the things that humans used to make glue out of was horse hooves, and they're looking for a certain chemical makeup that's in nails, fingernails or hooves, to get this gelatinous-like substance. So if I want to construct glue, and we're looking at what's in the frame here, we could destruct a finger, extract the fingernail, mix it with various other chemicals, and then we would be constructing glue. At the same time, we would be destructing the finger, which ties in with one of the principles in physics, which is that all energy is neither created or destroyed. Rather, it transforms, trans, as in transportation, it moves form. It moves from one form to another form. And that's what constructive and destructive is. It's the dissipating of one form that balances the creation or construction of another form. And coming back to this sense of right and wrong, we have the question, what is right and wrong? Why is right and why is wrong so relevant? Why has it played such a central theme in human relationships, in the formation and destruction of culture? And it's worth looking at the root word of culture, which is cult. Now, cults and dogmas have something in common. A dogma is the way it is because that's the way it is, because that's the way it is. A cult is very similar. Why do they eat raw fish in Japan and fried fish in England? Is there something innate that says that's the way it is? Why are fish and chips in England all slathered in oil and raw fish sushi in Japan isn't? Why do mindless children copy their parents and eat whatever was eaten in their cult? It's not from some higher sense of intelligence. That's what we do because that's what we did, and we did it because that's what they do, or that's what we did. And at best, there are, ecological dynamics. For example, if the fishing area is particularly diseased, particularly toxic in some form of imbalance, and the fish are consequently stressed and consequently become sick and filled with bacteria, you may want to cook your fish to kill the bacteria. But if the river then gets cleaned up, then we still continue eating fried fish because that's what we grew up in, doing. In other words, after the initial conversation that said, whatever, it's cold out, so let's have fried or cooked rather than raw. We're tired of boiled fish, so let's have fried fish, whatever it is. That conversation is had at one point in time and is iterated at one point in time and then is unquestioned dogma. We do it because we do it because we do it. And the danger in cults is when what is unconsciously copied and unquestionably done is detrimental relative to the available alternatives. Now, if it's detrimental relative to non-available alternatives, it's irrelevant. But if it's detrimental relative to available alternatives, then the cult becomes the enemy of well-being. And that's what makes it cult-like. A cult, which is an organization, an ecology of memes, is 99% unconscious. A cult is mostly dogma. Now, the problem comes when the outer environment shifts. The technology shifts, for example, so you no longer need to make glue out of hooves or nails. You no longer need to do that, but we keep killing horses because that's what we've always done. We no longer need to kill whales for lamp oil, but we do it because it's our tradition. We could easily make lamp oil out of parrot. In fact, we could have incandescent lights. In fact, we could have warm white LED lights that don't require the continual smogging of fossil fuels, that consume less electricity, that last longer. But it's our tradition, it's our cult to go out and kill whales and then take whale blubber and, make it into lamps and then kill our children with carbon monoxide in our house, because it's our tradition. It's the way that we've always done things. No one can take away our cult. The danger, of course, comes that the cult that was at one time innovative and was not cult-like, because the first person who discovered oil in whale blubber gave a great gift of light, of oil, to their tribe. They discovered a resource that was untapped. They figured it out. They tried this, they tried that, it was highly intelligent. So while a cult or a dogma is the unquestioned process of copying the past, that's what makes it dogmatic. I'm not going to look at new evidence. I'm not going to look at new data. I'm not going to be in the present moment. It's true because I said so, says the parent. And the child buys into the cult. Why? Because their parent said so. Don't question the teacher. Don't talk back to your parents. It's true because I said so. Turn off all critical thinking. Why? Why do we do this? Why? Shut up. Shut up. It's true because I said so. But why should I? Well, because I'm going to hit you. I'm going to send you to your room. I'm going to steal your food. You're not going to get any dessert. I'm going to hit you. I'm going to glare at you, this giant of a person that I am, because I can. Because I said so is the beginning of every dogma, of every cult. The king's rule is law. And this gets down step to the father's rule is law in a chauvinistic cult. And it's chauvinistic because I said so, because it's our tradition. You see, at one point in the history of the species, around the time of the human animal and thereafter, there isn't a lot of tools. There are no laptops, internets, computers. There's no graphic designer position to get food. Instead, there are wild animals and wild plants that are out there in the unknown. And in order to stay alive, we, the tribe, have to go out there in order to find some animal that is slower than other animals, that is weaker than other animals, that is younger or older than other animals. Why? So we can kill it. Because if the animal is smart and sensitive and intelligent and agile, it's going to escape. So we want something old, sick, dumb, small, unintelligent, that we can bludgeon to death and bring it back to the tribe and eat it. And of course, those low-hanging fruit, those dumb animals, die off quickly. You know, they were the first ones gotten. If you're hungry and you go out for food and you come across a wounded animal, well, you don't look any longer. You kill the wounded animal, you bring it back, you eat it. When you go out hunting again, that wounded animal is off the menu. So you look for something else, maybe a little fawn that's wandered away from its mother that hasn't learned, oh, thank goodness, this fawn doesn't know what it's doing, we'll kill it. And bring it back to the tribe. So in that framework, there also is a noticing, there's an awareness. Men seem to throw and aim things better than women. Their arms are built for throwing and aiming things more than female arms. On the other hand, men can't have babies. They don't seem as intelligent as raising babies. Now, if we don't have any babies, the tribe dies. There's no tribe, there's no civilization, there's no evolution without babies. And women are the best. They're number one at babies. And men are the best. They're number one at throwing things. Because when we can't walk up to a sick animal, because we've already killed them all in the vicinity, we have to throw something at a further away animal, an animal that's too smart to let us get right up and kill it. Because the animals do develop a little bit of an awareness over time that these two-legged things that walk up to them always kill their relatives. And so if you see one of these two-legged things, run, you know. So there becomes an awareness, like let's look out for two-legged things and run off when they come there. It's like, oh gosh. Now the two-legged things have to chase the animals that are running off. But the animals are faster. You've got to learn to throw things. And maybe men developed over periods of time genetically the ability to throw things better because they couldn't have and raise babies. Food was still needed, and they were out there generation after generation getting the food for the women and the babies so that there could be a future for the tribe. No women, no babies, no future. No food for women and babies, no future. So the kinds of species that didn't care about this are dead, meaning in the cosmology and history of evolution and the planet, 99.9% of all living organisms in the entire experiment called planetary evolution on this planet are dead. This type of bug mutated into that type of bug. Remember, energy is not created or destroyed, it changes. This type of fly died off. It couldn't keep up with this new type of fly which came into being. This type of humanoid died off. In other words, the bipedal animals, such as there were, that did not care enough about survival to take care of their young and to take care of the women that produced the young and to take care of the men that provided the food or inseminated the women. If you miss any of those groups, if you as a cult, as a meme, as a design, cannot take care of your women, you're a dead cult. If you cannot take care of your children, you're a dead cult. If you cannot take care of your men, you are a dead cult. That's just the way it is. And so the cults that survive, that progress forward, figure those things out. And it makes sense in the specialization of labor that if women cannot hunt while having a baby, it's kind of hard in labor, then since babies, women, and food are all required, it makes sense for the men to get good at hunting and getting food. So maybe the arms of men over hundreds of thousands of years became better at aiming and throwing because they did it generation after generation. And the men that were bad at throwing and hunting died off and didn't have as many children. And the men that were good at throwing and hunting had more children because they were alive longer and they provided healthier food for their women, themselves, and their children. So it makes sense in an ecology that demands survival, that demands gathering food, that the men who are best at gathering food become a fulcrum, meaning once women are good at having children and good at raising children, then a tremendous amount of the teeter-totter, does this tribe die off or grow, is determined by the quality of the male hunting technology. Who figures out how to throw a rock and help out? Who figures out how to use fire? Who can run the fastest? Who can throw the longest stone? Who can not give the scent away? Who can figure out where the wind is likely to change and move to be, upwind, where you're not in the animal's awareness, that you're trying to kill, that you're trying to trick. So you also see things like lying. I'm going to deceive this animal so that I can kill it. Because if I'm successful at that, then my tribe will grow more than another tribe that's not as successful. Because the friendly hunter setting out on the savannah, "Cooey, I'm coming to kill you and your fellow relatives," is not very successful. "Hello there, zebras. Hello there, deer. I'm just going to butcher a few of you. I'll be back next week." That doesn't work very well. Deception. Lies. And you want to figure out how to be a sociopath. Now, an empath connects with all living things around it. An empath asks and is defined by two questions. Who is in the most pain? How can I help? This is what defines our humanity. Empathy. The rising above the sociopathic instinct of a reptile, of a hunter. So, we breed for reptilian traits. We breed for sociopathic traits by rewarding the kill, the hunt, by rewarding that with more meat. And more meat means more vitamins, more warmth, more fat. More meat means this line of animal continues to develop. And so if we understand that this is evolution, we can also understand that evolution began a long time before human beings. It began a long time before human animals. And rather than saying that evolution is a part of us, given the 25 billion years of evolution and the billions upon billions of distinct iterations of life that have evolved through and as part of evolution, it makes a lot of sense to consider us as a very small part of evolution rather than evolution as a small part of us. And so the question is, what's life about? What is this program called life? What's this process? What's this pattern of energy? No energy is created or destroyed. It simply transforms from one shape, from one idea, from one paradigm to another. What is the core pattern of life? And if we're to look at present-day science, our present-day mythology, because every cult in human history has had a story. There have been more than 10,000 human cults in human history, and they've all had a story. Where did I come from? Where are we going? What's the reason for existence? These are the kinds of stories that every curious mind reaches out for, wants to understand. And the language, the mythology, constructs a narrative. We were born on a big turtle. Then we came out of a big snake. And this is what we're about. That narrative is a heuristic meme, a heuristic truth that, when effective, points the members of the tribe in a direction that leads to life. And what is life's plan? Well, in our mythology, in our story of that question, why are we here? We say, if we are a rationalist, a reductionist, a Cartesian thinker, I think, therefore I am. René Descartes, a Cartesian thinker, a French guy. And we got Cartesian thinking from Descartes, and we got chauvinistic thinking from Chauvin. So the French have played a central theme in developing core Western ideologies, memes. I think, therefore I am, so the emphasis is on thought. Now, why not I feel, therefore I am, or I sense, therefore I am? Well, somebody said that, but that wasn't elevated within the cult. Now, the question is why? Well, one of the greatest efficiency, or the greatest augmentations of efficiency in the history of the species, is the development of thought. Thoughts are a technology. Thought breaks everything down into language. That's the first step of a thought. You've got to divide the whole into language. That's what thoughts do. This is a mass of energy. It's an interconnected ecology. But if I just say, hello, mass of energy and interconnected ecology, how are you, other mass of energy and interconnected ecology, I can't do anything with that. I, the distinct pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, I can't do anything with that. Pattern of energy and a pattern of energy, what's the difference? Well, you got to break it into distinctions. This is a fingernail, and this is a fingertip, and this is a finger joint. In other words, I cut the whole into pieces. Now, this could be called the fall from grace. And it is. There have been thousands of stories of falling from grace, of coming out of the garden. And in the Christian mythology, we have the falling from grace, the coming out of the garden, as we become aware of the technology of distinction, the technology of language, the technology that cuts the whole into parts, the knowledge of good and evil, of right and wrong. Now, it's important to understand that from a geometrical perspective, from a mathematical, scientific perspective, right and wrong are equal because all polarity is equal. Every single polarity that one can create, black and white, up and down. You see, try and make a case for there being more up than there is down. Meaning, take a line at any point in the universe and head in one direction, we're staying up. Just head there and see how long it takes you to come to the end. Now go to the opposite direction and head in that direction and see how long it takes you to get to an end. Now, if we do that on our planet, if we head east and keep flying east and keep flying east and keep flying east and keep flying east, we'll come up from the west. Wait a minute, I thought we were flying east. How did we get west if we flew east? And we find this pattern in space and time. We find this pattern in polarity. If you set out to do good and just 100% focus on doing 100% good, you discover just how bad you can be. You know, you start this equation, and maybe it's we've got to get rid of killing. Okay, so we're going to head that. So no killing. You killed. We got to get rid of that. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to lock you up, which is going to shorten your life, which is going to kill someone. You know, it's difficult to head in an absolute. And so the fall from grace is parallel with the technology of breaking the whole into polarity, but also elevating half of all that is above the other half. The knowledge of good and evil, of God and Lucifer, or of light and darkness, whatever that polarity is, scientifically, if it's a true cut, every polarity is equal. You cut an orange in half and you do a good job. They both weigh the same amount, they're the same amount of mass. But if you take the orange and break it into the knowledge of good and evil, you cut it in half, now you've got a problem called waste. There's half of all that is that I should do something to get rid of. Unfortunately, it is inextricably linked to the other half. In fact, the other half doesn't exist without it. Because if the other half was all that is, if you truly could destroy energy rather than just change its form, it would be all that is. And there'd be no, you can't have a knowledge of something that isn't. So, for there to be good, there must be bad. For there to be good, there must be evil. And it's nice that they're spelled, opposite. You have live, and the opposite of live, evil. You just spell live backwards. And that's, in many ways, a good way of putting it. You've got a polarity. And so what does life do? What has life been doing for 25 billion years? With an endless amount of time in her future. Life's not in a hurry. Time's not in a hurry. You may be in a hurry. They may be in a hurry. But life is not in a hurry. According to our narrative, life has been going on for about 25 billion years. And our myth is not that we came out of a turtle. It's not that we were spat out of the mouth of a giant snake. It's not that chariots from heaven came down and blessed the planet, and we grew like Hiawatha out of an ear of corn. And there we were, out of an ear of corn. No, our myth is that we came from nothing. That 25 billion years ago, there was absolutely nothing. That's myth number one. Of course, we're not back there to be able to check the details. But we've always created stories because we want certainty. We want meaning. We want some sense of what the pattern is. Because with the development of the rational brain is the pattern that through language, through the cutting up of the uninterrupted whole, creates relationship. You cannot have a relationship until you have two parts. You can't have two parts until the whole is cut into two. Now you can have a relationship between two parts that are, in fact, before the conceptualization of the rational brain through language, are not two parts. So we create two out of one through the lens of language. You take away the language. Does a tree make a sound if no one hears it? Does something exist if no one witnesses it anywhere? If no one can witness it, does it exist? Are we in the realm of fantasy? Are we in the realm of science? You decide. And you decide through your paradigms, either by copying the paradigms of your cult unquestioningly. Of course, I'm a rational person. Rationality was invented by your cult. It's used to create suffering, and it's used to create well-being. Is it rational to use energy to create unnecessary suffering for you and those you care for? People do it rationally all the time. Some of the professors in our cult that have more degrees, more postgraduate degrees than any other people on the planet, are statistically less happy than someone without any degree at all. So if intelligence can be measured by the efficiency with which energy, time, money, and natural resources is transformed into sustainable human well-being, is it intelligent to apply the paradigm of rationality in ways that increase statistical suffering? Well, you decide. You decide that. Either by blindly copying your cult or by thinking it through for yourself, coming up with a framework to make that decision. How do I make that decision? How do I decide whether or not I should decide that rationality is always better than irrationality, as I define rationality and I define irrationality? How do I decide? What's my system of answering that question, other than to look at the paragons, at the deities elevated in my cult who say such and such? And then do I look at the religious deities? Or do I look at the scientific deities? Or do I make up my own deities? What do I do? Am I an individual, an identity, or am I a group? Am I part of a cult? How much of me is iteratively looking at the full spectrum of possibility to define what is the most intelligent, the most efficient path to sustainable well-being? Because that drive is beneath every single human behavior. There is an innate drive in every human being to feel better. And not just feel better, but to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling worse. And not just worse, but chronically worse. When you go to a surgeon and have them set your elbow, you feel worse, but you feel chronically better than if they amputate your arm, or if the bone never sets and you just wander around with a broken limp-hanging bone that can't do anything. You increase the short-term pain to increase the chronic well-being. The sustainable well-being is what every human being is after. If they can stomach the short-term pain. You want to be financially independent for the rest of your life? My virtual assistant saves 70% of the money I pay him, and he will be financially independent in the next 5 years. With a paid-off house and enough money at age 35 to live off the dividends of his investments. But it took effort. It took a choice to not immediately spend 70% of his income in order to get that long-term sense of security and of pleasure, to be able to focus his time on what he feels like focusing on. By not focusing his money on what he feels like spending it on. So you have short-term discomfort for long-term comfort. And there again you see the engagement of polarity. You see, there's a relationship between these two supposedly independent things that says, in a cold, snowy climate like upstate New York, where 3 feet of snow is the norm in January, it's sunny, I feel good, I want to go out for a swim in July, but I'm not going to. I'm going to get off the towel. I'm going to put on some clothes. I'm going to cut down a tree. I'm going to cut it into logs. I'm going to stack those logs in a covered pile so that come January, I can get through the winter with 3 feet of snow. I'm going to prepare and can food when I don't feel like it, when there's no immediate pressure, because I'm going to think about the future. So you see, there's a connection. There's a connection between good and bad, between pain and pleasure. Sometimes you have to go into more pain in the short term to get out of long-term pain. Sometimes you have to have the bone set. Sometimes you have to cut the wood for the winter fire. Sometimes you have to gather and dry food for the 3 feet of snow and the 3 months in which you cannot grow anything in the garden. It depends on the situation. If you're in Thailand, being more spontaneous and in the present makes sense because there is no 3 feet of snow in the winter. You can do things that feel good because you can catch fish year-round. But if you're a rice farmer in Thailand, you have to be out planting and tending the rice in order to get the harvest. Everywhere you look, investing in the future has a sting, has a price in the present, but yields dividends. So, you see, you grow rice so that you can survive and eat rice, so that you can feel good. But in order to grow rice, you got to get off your butt and do things that feel bad. In other words, you cannot create the true line, the fictional technology. You can't do that. And keep them separate. If you say that pain is bad, then you can't plant rice or cut firewood because it's more uncomfortable than sunbathing on the beach. If you say that pain is good, then you go and do uncomfortable things that often lead to beneficial results. You say that pleasure is only good, so I'm not going to leave the beach. I'm not going to cut any of the wood. I'm going to pursue the pleasurable path and then freeze in January because there's no warmth to provide for me. Then I didn't succeed. I had short-term pleasure for 6 months rather than the pleasure of a long-term life. So this concludes part 1 of the exploration of right and wrong, and I'll see you in part 2.